Hey, g'day, it's Preso and welcome back to my channel. Now I'm working on the Colchester lathe themed clock today. Now we're actually going to get that clock finished and I'll get it up on the wall. But I just realised I haven't done an update on my map recently. And somebody reminded me of this in the comments, and people often tell me where they live in the world, and I keep a notepad beside my desk and I write those locations down and I'll check them out on Google Maps because I love to see where people are watching from. And my wife and I do like to travel, so it's always a good way of actually working out where the next destination might be. So I have got some new pins on the board today, but I need to tell you that there are some locations that are just completely full and I cannot physically fit any more pins in. So if we look at this sort of eastern coast of the USA, certainly around the UK and Europe, it's physically hard to find out where those pins have got to go and actually fit them in there. But I did add some new locations. So the new ones that went up on the map just recently were Mindelo in Cape Verde, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Dawson City, Yukon. There's a place called Salt Creek in Coorong. Now the Coorong is a long strip of land that runs along the south coast of South Australia. Absolutely beautiful place, and it's well worth a visit. It's almost like wilderness, but yeah, very, very pretty. Isle of Skye, which is a new one, Swanton, Ohio, New Bern, North Carolina, Ho Chi Minh City, Limoges in France. There was also Palma de Mallorca, a beautiful little island. There's North Platte, Nebraska, and another place in Hungary which I won't even try to pronounce, but I'll put it up on the screen. So the map has been updated and I'll put it back up on the wall over my lathe there. And if you do live in some parts of the world where I said there were too many pins, tell me anyway. I do like to hear where people live and where they're watching from. Oh, and that reminds me, when I was doing the pins and I was looking for a location in the Netherlands, I was scanning across Google Maps and I came to this area called Baal. Now, from a distance, the border in Baal looks like this sort of tight knot of black lines, and when you zoom in on it, you realise that this is the actual border between the Netherlands and Belgium. Now, it turns out that the border was set back in the mid-1800s, and this is when Belgium seceded from the Netherlands, and they had to agree on where the border would be, and it was often divided up along family lines. So there were some families with extended land holdings and they identified as being Belgian, and there were other families who had large farms and large tracts of land and they identified as being Dutch people. So the border was often set in that way. And in this area called Baal, it's so convoluted that you can have pockets or islands of land belonging to, say, Belgium, and then you can have surrounding areas that belong to the Netherlands. And in fact, if you walk down the street in some of these areas, you'll see white crosses painted on the footpath or the sidewalk, and that's to tell you that you are now crossing the border between one country and the other. And it's often the case where the border passes through a single property. So you can have a building where one end of the building is in the Netherlands, the other end of the building is in Belgium, and the people who live there have actually used that to their advantage. So sometimes there are tax advantages to signing a document in one country or the other. So all you need to do is walk down one end of the building and sign it and then come back to the other end. So there's all these sorts of strange things that go on in this area. Now, it turns out that due to the current conflict in this sort of general area up here, and where else, this sort of general area down here, that negotiators were sent in from this border region to help these people who are currently in this terrible conflict to try to come to some sort of understanding or agreement about how to get on with your neighbours. So I certainly hope that that's going to happen, because my fervent hope going into the new year is that these people who are currently in this terrible, terrible conflict can learn to actually get along with their neighbours. Anyway, enough said, don't want to get political. So let's go over and have a look at where we're at with the clock. This is where we got to in the last episode. So this large aluminium disc here has been powder coated. I selectively burned off the powder coat in the center area with my 50 watt CO2 laser. You could do that on a diode laser as well. And that was as big as I could physically do on my machine. So to get this other area, which is sometimes called a chapter ring, I did that on the lathe, and then I trimmed up the outside edge of the circular disc while it was on the lathe. Now I drilled 12 positions around the chapter ring. They will be the hour mark positions, and I've got some red powder coated screws there which will fit into those holes. Now what I need to do today is go ahead and cut the outlines of the digits and fit those onto the disc. We're also going to chemically etch this and then powder coat it in clear. Now some people ask where I got this image from. I just did a Google image search. I found this online and I vectorized it and I turned it into both a bitmap and a vector image. I cleaned it up a bit, didn't do a perfect job, and in fact you see here there's a bit of an artifact which shouldn't be there, that squiggly line, but I think it's okay, we'll get around it. So if you're interested in having that image, if you want it for your own project, I put it on my Dropbox and there's a link in the description and it's there as both a bitmap and a vector image if you want it for free. When I cut these plastic digits, you'll probably say, well, I don't own a laser cutter engraver, so I can't do that. But don't forget, you can use basic tools for doing these things. So these fret saws, you probably got one that belonged to your grandfather, and these work well. And you can cut metal, you can cut plastic and wood. And if you don't own a laser cutter engraver, you can do a similar thing by screen printing. You can do it by layering together two different colored materials, once again, cut with a saw like that. So you just got to think laterally and say, well, what tools do I have? How can I make it work? And just get on and do it. Alrighty, let's get on and do these plastic digits. For the red digits, I did have a big enough piece of stock to do them all in one go. So I've arranged them in Lightburn as compact as I could. And you just press start and away it goes. For these outrigger parts, I'm just having to do them individually because I've only got scrap pieces of clear acrylic. I don't have a big enough piece to do them all in one set. So I'm just having to do them by rotating them and positioning them very carefully on the software so they end up landing in this space here. Now that I have all of those shapes laser cut, I've got to bond everything together. Now this is a very early prototype that I made just to test out the process, and initially I thought I'd use this stuff. This is a cyanoacrylate adhesive and it's super quick, but that's the problem. So I did this number 2 first and dropped it within the outline that I'd laser etched onto the surface of that clear acrylic, which was there just to align everything, and bonded it down. It was great. Went to do the number 1 and I just misaligned it, and you don't get any opportunity to slide that around and get it within that laser etched outline. So at the bottom here it's out by about 2.5 millimeters. So I scrapped that idea, and what I'll use instead is this stuff. So this is just an epoxy adhesive. It's called Ultra Clear, and that way if I squeeze a bit out, it's not going to make a mess. But also I realized that if I leave the paper on the clear part and just peel off the paper where the number goes, I can put the glue within that boundary, drop the number in there, and it sort of self-aligns. And that way you can peel the paper off later, and if there is any spilled or smeared glue, you're not making such a big mess. So I'll go ahead and do that, and unfortunately with all of this clear, some of the parts didn't have paper, and I didn't think about it. I just went ahead and cut it and etched it. So with these I'll just have to be a bit more careful. So I'm thinking with this stuff you don't need a lot. So I'm just going to put some little blobs in there. Because the surfaces are so flat, this epoxy will spread out. And it's not like we're putting any weight on this, so it should be fine. So I've already taken the paper off the back of these, so everything's nice and clean. It's just a matter of pushing it into place, trying to be accurate. You can sort of wriggle it around a bit and smear that glue. Now you get plenty of time to work with this stuff, so you can sort of move it around, check it, turn it around, make sure that you haven't cocked it up anywhere. That looks good. And I'm just going to hold these together with some of these stainless steel pegs. Alright, so that one's done. I'm just going to do them all like that, and then we can peel the paper off and they're ready to go together. One of the problems with acrylic is as it gets old, this paper backing gets really brittle and it sticks. The brand new stuff is great to work with. But this is like scrap that I've had for many, many years. Well, that's interesting. That super clear epoxy goes off in about 3 minutes. I didn't read the instructions. I assumed that that would be that 24-hour stuff. It looks like I'm going to have to mix up a batch for every couple of numbers or get them all prepared, and I'll mix the glue and get it all on one hit. So yeah, that's strange. Okay, I'm a bit better organised now, so I'll try and get all this on really quickly. Because this stuff does bond very quickly and it goes off very quickly, I'm not bothering about using clamps. I don't think it's necessary. Certainly easier if you leave the paper on the top surface there. Just didn't think that through before. Okay, you get the idea. I'll do the rest of these off camera. After that epoxy cured, I drilled out all of the laser cut holes to 4.2 millimeters, but I went very, very carefully because it was a brand new drill bit, and drill bits can grab and chip or break acrylic. What you really want for drilling acrylic is a drill bit with either zero rake or negative rake. However, I went carefully and I managed to get it done. Now after that, all of the drilled holes were tapped for M5. If I take the paper off these parts now, you can see where the epoxy has cured on the back of the red numbers. So I think you can see it there, and that's sufficient to hold those in place. The next step is to clean up the surface and try to get a more uniform look between the areas that were etched in the laser engraver and the areas that were turned in the lathe. Now there is still a coating on these darker areas, and to get that off I'm going to etch it chemically using sodium hydroxide or caustic soda. Now this solution will actually attack the aluminium. It will start to etch it away, and it creates hydrogen gas, and also it's exothermic. The reaction is exothermic, which means that it liberates a lot of heat. And to help that along, we're going to use a red Scotch-Brite pad, just give it a scrub, and then we'll finish up with the grey Scotch-Brite. Then we'll clean it and put a clear powder coat over the top of all of that. So this is the solution that I'll be using, and yes, do wear gloves, do wear a face shield, wear some protective clothing. This stuff is corrosive to your skin, and it's going to be serious if you get it in your eyes, so please take the normal precautions. Now I've got about 3 litres of clean tap water here, and I've dissolved about 250 grams of caustic soda into that cold water. And then what you do is you get a bit of scrap material and you just try it out. So this is just a piece of scrap aluminium, and as soon as that goes into the solution, you'll see it starts to fizz and it gives off that hydrogen gas. Now this is a way of just checking to see how corrosive the mix is that you've made, and if you notice that the reaction is quite violent, then water it down, dilute it, and keep trying that until you think that you can control it. But I don't know if you can see that, but there's some fine fizzing bubbles coming off that now, and the longer you leave it, the more etched that surface will become. And like I said, there's a fair bit of heat given off in the process, so you do want to control it. So I've sort of tuned this, and I think that this is manageable, and it's going to clean up the surface quite well. So I'm going to put this into a bigger container, and then we'll try cleaning our aluminium stock and trying to get that uniform look to it. Unfortunately, the only container I've got big enough to do this is one of those big soft plastic tubs, like a garden tub, and I washed that out and rinsed it, and I put the clock face on a piece of 8mm stainless steel all thread, and this will allow me to lower that into the solution and do that safely without splashing anything. And later on I'm going to use that same fixture for the powder coating. Alright, here we go. Now to start with, not much is going to happen because there's a film of surface dirt and oil and oxide on there, but that sodium hydroxide will gradually etch through that, and then you start to see that reaction happening. And when you see the fine bubbles all over the surface, that's when you should take it out and give it a scrub with Scotch-Brite. So I can see down here we're getting a reaction already. Certainly around that ring that I turn on the lathe, that's sort of fresh exposed aluminium, so that's going to react quicker. If I get some light on that, you can see that reaction taking place right now. And I reckon that's ready to come out, and we'll give it the first scrub with the Scotch-Brite. So I'm going to tape this in next door now, and I'll rinse this in water, and then we'll give it the scrub, and we'll just see how it looks. Just spraying this with some of that simple green cleaner. Right, and just go slowly with this. Alright, I'll take that next door and rinse it, and then we'll have a look at it, and you basically repeat that step probably 2 or 3 times, depending on the level of etch that you're looking for. But that's already cleaned up, probably about 95% of it. So this time I'm going to use the grey Scotch-Brite. Alright, that's fine. I think that's removed all of the residue, and what we're doing now in the next step is just getting a sort of a frosted aluminium finish on the surface. We'll try and blend all of these scratch marks made by the Scotch-Brite, and then we just got to clean it thoroughly, dry it, and we'll do the powder coat. So there it is after the second run and the rinse, and I think that's probably good enough, but we'll do one more etch. Now you'll notice that the process starts a lot more quickly when we've done the second scrub on that, because now we have really clean aluminium, reacts very quickly, and we don't want to be in here too long. Don't forget also that the hydrogen gas that's given off by this process is explosive. You don't want to be doing this in a confined space or a small unventilated workshop. I think you can see there now it looks nice and silvery. We don't see any real difference between the outer area that chapped a ring and the area that was etched. So I think that's what we're looking for. Okay, I can't. Shut up, kookaburras! Okay, I can't see any sort of residue left on that. The surface looks uniform, so I'm going to rinse this and we're done. Not sure if you can see it, but with the light shining off that, you can see the area around where I put my name and the date. It's dull, and that's why I scrubbed it with the grey Scotch-Brite, and I want that finish all over the red powder coat now, and that means that the clear has got a better chance of adhering to that without delaminating later. So I've got a clean Scotch-Brite pad, a grey one, and a sanding block. I'm just going to go over this now and just scuff that surface uniformly. Alright, I think that's pretty good now. I'm going to clean that off with some paper towel, and I'll just dust that down with some IPA like alcohol, and yeah, then we'll get the clear on. The difficult thing about doing a large part like this in a small powder coating oven is, how do you move it, how do you get it in the oven and out again without touching the surface. So I'm using that same piece of stainless steel all thread that I used when I was etching the part, and I've got this extended out both sides of the disc, and I've earthed to that same piece of all thread, and I've got a block of wood here. Now this block of wood will go in the oven with the part, but it allows me to turn it over in between doing both sides, and then just pick it up by the wood, put the whole thing in the oven. Okay, here we go. The thing about this clear powder coat is it doesn't totally obscure what's underneath it. Once you've got that sort of uniform white appearance over the whole thing, that's usually enough. That's what it looks like up close after the clear's gone on. You will see through it, but as long as you've got a uniform coverage, it'll be fine. So So I'm going to take the earth clip off this now and pick up the whole piece of wood with the disc on it and put the whole thing in the oven. Okay, don't drop it, Mark. That's been about 8 minutes. You can see it gloss starting to appear on that now. That'll flow out eventually, look like glass. So I'll give it 10 minutes after it goes like that. So this just came out of the oven. It's still hot and I've just clamped it in the vise there to cool down. Quite happy with the way the powder coat's turned out on that. What I need to do next is work on the hands for the clock movement. Now, when I bought this clock movement, it came with pairs of hands and you could buy them in sets of different lengths. This hour hand looked about right, but the minute hand that came with it seems to be way longer than it actually needs to be. So what I need to do is shorten this, but it's only made of thin aluminium and it's very prone to creasing or kinking, so I've got to be a bit careful about how I hold it and how I cut it. But I have a cunning plan. So this is the length of the minute hand when I received it, and this is the length that I want it to be when it's done. And you see this plastic template here is still bigger than the length of the hour hand, so I think it's going to work. So in order to get this template made, what I did was I scanned the original minute hand. I turned that bitmap image into a vector image. That means it has a path all around the outline of the minute hand. Now once it's in a vector format or a path format, you can grab hold of the nodes that make up the points down this end of the hand and just simply shorten it back. Now this template here is slightly narrower across the points because when this template goes on top of the minute hand, I had to be mindful about keeping the edges at this point the same width. So in order to make the plastic template, I used the same vector image and I laser cut 2 of these acrylic templates. Now I can sandwich the original aluminium hand between those 2 templates and that will keep it flat while we go about cutting off the waste material. I've got that sandwich in between those 2 acrylic templates now, and I put a 3mm Phillips head screw down this end and a nut on the back there and grip that end very tightly. Got a small clamp up this end here, and what I'm going to do now is trim this off sort of close to the edge of the template. So I'm just going to use a pair of jeweler's snips because they're nice and sharp, and we're just going to nip off that end there, and I'm just going to sort of roughly cut this close to the template. And of course you've got to be careful here not to kink the aluminium, so it's just going to look awful. Alright, so that's got it roughly cut, and what I'll do now is use a Dremel with a drum sander and we're just going to clean off the excess that sits outside the edge of the template. Okay, I think that's worked pretty well. There is a plastic film on the surface of this black aluminium hand here, so I'll remove that and have a close look. And luckily, clamping it between the 2 acrylic templates here hasn't removed the kink down the centre of the hand, so it's still got that uniform bend in it. Well, there it is with the film removed. There is a light burr on that, which I'll remove now with a very fine sanding stick. The original edge of the hand still has the raw aluminium finish on it anyway, so it won't look any different up here. what I'll do is turn this over and I'll align the opposite numbers. So the 3 and the 9, for example, I can put a straight edge along the tabs here, the connecting tabs. I'll align those, tighten down the screws. Now the problem with using powder coated screws is that there's powder in the hex socket, and that means that the regular hex key won't fit in there. So I'm using an imperial hex key in a metric screw. Sacrilege, I know, but it does fit. And although it doesn't fit well, it's enough to nip those screws up. But there's one here, this, I think it's the 4, yeah, it's quite loose. I think I've got some powder in the thread. I'll probably take that one out and clean the thread up, and I'll be able to tighten that one down. Okay, that gets it mostly aligned. I'll just tighten up the screws on the other side. Oh, there it is, got a battery in it, it's running, it's set to the correct time, and on the back I put my name and the completion date in Roman numerals. So I guess it's time now to get this up on the wall and call this project done. Oh, man, that's a struggle. I don't know, is that straight? I think that's straight. Okay, it's done. Well, there it is, guys, up on the wall. I think it looks great. I just realised that there was one of the digits was a bit crooked. I think I bumped it when I was putting it up there, but I've corrected that now. I think shortening the minute hand made a big difference to the aesthetics of the clock. It looks a lot more balanced now. Now this is my last project for 2023. I've got 2 new ones that are already filmed and edited, and they're just sitting there waiting to be published, but you will see them in the new year. So for now, I'm going to say goodbye for 2023. I hope to see you again next year. Stay safe. Preso, cheers.